My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am a retired field grade Army officer who formerly served as the operations officer for all Army strategic counterintelligence in the continental United States, or CONUS. And the purpose of this informational briefing is to provide to the general public a debriefing regarding the context of ongoing litigation which we initiated against the governor, which for unknown reasons has not yet been published in the press. This timely review was believed to be imperative in light of a current effort to promote mass vaccinations, including a recent event held for selected senior citizens at a raceway in Richmond, which delivered treatments that had been rushed through production and approval and which have already resulted in some fatalities nationwide. In this instance, presented to almost 5,000 for a population that already represents over half of the over 5,000 fatalities in the Commonwealth, to a novel coronavirus that has greatly disrupted the state of normalcy for most citizens in Virginia. The litigation was the very first challenge brought against the lockdown orders, commenced on April 2nd, and certainly has been the topic of considerable consternation on social media, even without any reports of it in the press. Conduct that can fairly be characterized as unlawful tampering with a witness in litigation on a federal question, which is punishable as a felony under 18 U.S.C. Section 1512. And those so engaged or intending to do so are therefore advised of their right to remain silent, since, despite commencement of litigation on April 2nd in the Circuit Court for the City of Alexandria, not even State Attorney General Mark Herring, who has published press releases about several court challenges in which he has easily prevailed in defending the governor's COVID-19 response and lockdown, has remained in contempt of court, not choosing to say anything since the commencement of the litigation, conduct that may also fairly be characterized as obstruction of justice, criminal conduct that constitutes a felony punishable by fine and or up to 20 years in federal prison, for which we are presently petitioning the Fourth Circuit to compel the Federal District Court in Richmond to convene a grand jury in an interlocutory motion to that appellate tribunal that is currently deciding a related matter raised regarding the facial covering mandate, and filed in June. So, for the next few minutes, we shall be addressing the factual context within which this litigation is framed, to better provide the general public an understanding of the underlying issues about which the governor has been less than forthcoming, even in weekly COVID-19 updates live streamed on social media. This briefing is unclassified. With regard to the 6 PHEIC declarations, it is of at least probative value that each and every one has involved a virus, which the science community has generally acknowledged to be the world's most abundant biological particle. But despite enjoying optimal conditions for mutations, like the ability to spread all around the world for the present COVID-19, which some news organizations have given the great potential for possible larger fatalities and infections, the large size of this population should be giving rise to variant strains to emerge in forms harmful to man. Yet, as of 2010, there had only been 219 identified, to include SARS, but not yet MERS by that time, both alleged to have been zoonotically evolved from bat coronaviruses, although in a form that had somehow zoonotically evolved in dromedary camels in the case of MERS, for which scientists continue to attempt to explain exactly how that particular emergent pathogen might have found primarily outbreaks in nosocomial hospitals, because it would be easily identified if a camel walked into a hospital with no great incidence of wider infection in the general community. For many, just by nature of mathematical probability, the population of viruses would appear to present the least potential threat to mankind. And so these 6 PHEIC declarations immediately pose a blaring anomaly, just as much as the great confidence early expressed by the World Health Organization that COVID-19 was expected to be a rampant pathogen that would be rather easily controlled without pharmacological intervention, which obviously was not the case, as we saw with the raceway rush to vaccinate elderly citizens in Richmond recently, as the pathogen has presented, while not yet the fatalities associated with the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, nor that pandemic's high case fatality rate, reported to have killed many nurses recruited from the wider community at Fort Riley, Kansas, where the pathogen first arose in the United States, but also over 1,000 fatalities within just a week after the Liberty Loan Parade in Philadelphia, both of which events failed yet to present an adequate foothold to set off the proliferation pattern currently being witnessed in the United States. It is of note that the Liberty Loan Parade provides ample evidence that the pathogen was not just a very lethal pathogen in the Spanish flu, but also a highly contagious pathogen, sufficient to produce mass casualties instantaneously in a super spreader event in an outdoor environment. While COVID-19, not even in the Rose Garden event, has replicated this capability, and in every credible large sample size tracer contact study to date, has failed to be validated as even an infectious disease, attaining the threshold of at least 20% in secondary attack rate, but rather has consistently demonstrated a secondary attack rate below 5%, or 4 times too low to be accurately described as a pathogen being transmitted from person to person, or contagious, or infectious, despite being described often in the press as highly contagious, which just belies the science. It has been known since the 1980s that to set off a super spreader event, a pathogen must be a highly infectious disease with a secondary attack rate of at least 60%, or one that requires, like tuberculosis, a very low infectious dose. In the case of tuberculosis, just 10 bacilli. Particularly for those recently placed in reasonable apprehension of fear or grave bodily harm from a novel coronavirus, an unconscionable compromised position, most often described in criminal law as a prima facie case of extortion, in a rush to get vaccinated, like at the recent mass vaccination event at the Richmond Raceway. It is of note that the Virginia State Supreme Court in 2004 decided the case of City of Chesapeake v. Cunningham, a sovereign immunity case in which Miss Cunningham, alleged that her miscarriage was caused by toxic water supplied by that city, and that the city did not provide adequate information on the water supply's known risk to pregnant women. Ms. Cunningham did not prevail in her challenge over the city's defense of sovereign immunity because the court had found that the city had provided more than adequate notice of dangers presented and documented well their efforts to correct them, having provided notice to the City of Chesapeake obstetricians and gynecologists, family practitioners, internists, CDH supervisors, city officials, the Chesapeake Public School Administration, newspapers, television and radio station news departments, Chesapeake General Hospital officials, Cox Communication and VDH officials. The city had also gone further by mailing copies of the notice to new water customers. Messina v. Burden, a 1984 case often quoted in legal briefs by the government agencies when they want to protect themselves in the Commonwealth of Virginia, proclaims that the doctrine of sovereign immunity is alive and well in Virginia. So beware. And as the court noted to Ms. Cunningham, a special plea of sovereign immunity, if proven, creates a bar to a plaintiff's claim of recovery. The court recognized the two distinctions for cases in which the defense of sovereign immunity may be raised in the Commonwealth, either arising from a governmental function or a proprietary function of the government. And providing a definition, the court stated that governmental functions are powers and duties are performed exclusively for the public welfare, noting that a function is governmental if it entails the exercise of an entity's political, discretionary, or legislative authority. Conversely, proprietary functions are performed primarily for the benefit of the municipality, wherein, if the function is a ministerial act and involves no discretion, it is proprietary, and acts of negligence would pierce the veil of sovereign immunity in the Commonwealth for those proprietary functions of government, as the court found support in prior decisions, including the 1927 case of Richmond v. Virginia Bonded Warehouse Corporation, and the 1993 case of Woods v. County, Marion. Vaccinations, just like mandates for facial coverings, restrictions on places of worship, closing of private recreational facilities, restrictions on occupancy in restaurants and business establishments, and other orders imposed under COVID-19 regime would most likely be determined by courts of law within the realm of a governmental and not a proprietary function, being essentially political, as all appear to acknowledge, discretionary or legislative by authority, and those actions cannot withstand constitutional muster if they are arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion. When the statutory authority, as prescribed by the deliberations of the legislature, had determined that the governor and the state health commissioner had to have first identified a defined public health threat in the form of a communicable disease being transferred from person to person, which no credible large sample size trace of contact study to date has yet done, and which validation on all evidence, even if by neglecting to equip public health authorities to commence tracer contact to validate the existence of a communicable disease in willful blindness, and where even at the present there is no identified area of the Commonwealth that has demonstrated the levels in mortality sufficient to meet the threshold of a local epidemic, or 6.7% mortality rate. Any mandates or efforts to promote mass vaccinations, especially through extortionate means, would present clear and convincing evidence of conduct that is arbitrary, capricious, and an abuse of discretion. All facts that the leading infectious disease control expert should know better than anyone. This briefing has been unclassified. That concludes this brief. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Christian, every conservative, every Republican, every Virginian, and every American true to, like the motto of the infantry, follow me, and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Here. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.